after a jury found Hunter guilty of gun felonies, Joe Biden said he is proud of him. Quote, "Jill and I love our son, and we are so proud of the man he is today." There's no contrition at all by the Biden family. Hunter didn't show any remorse. He was smiling afterwards. His father's not ashamed, wouldn't even gently condemn his son's actions. Hunter's committed more crimes than we can count, and all Biden says is he's proud. The reason Hunter's broken the law for 30 years and not paid the piper is because of his dad. If every time I screwed up and my dad's response was, "I'm proud, son, I love you," I'd keep screwing up. Bailing somebody out over and over again doesn't mean you love them. Hunter was kicked out of the Navy for cocaine on an administrative discharge instead of a dishonorable one because his dad greased the brass. Hunter got caught with cocaine at the Jersey Shore way back in the 80s, and the senator's son had his record expunged. When he left his crack pipe in a rental car, police investigated and dropped the charges. When he put 20 grand on his dad's Amex for Russian escorts, the Secret Service cleaned it up. When he lost his laptop, the FBI and CIA covered it up. When he owed millions in back taxes, his sugar brother footed the bill. When he needed money for alimony and child support, Daddy's donors bought his dopey art. His dad's own Justice Department tried to make the gun and tax case go away a year ago today. What makes you think Daddy won't save him again?
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
Biden never used the word commute. Commuting a sentence means you just spring him out of prison. The charge is still on their record. Biden's going to have to save his son to save his own hide. Remember the taxes and the gun? Only a fraction of the crimes Hunter and Joe Biden would be guilty of if prosecutors were allowed to follow the facts. Whistleblowers have testified that investigators were blocked at every turn from following leads that led to Joe. The CIA and FBI and the Treasury Departments are all in on the cover-up.
This says #1 son on the license plate.
I'm gonna make you proud, Daddy.
You make your daddy proud.
I'm gonna make you so proud.
You make your daddy proud.
You're gonna be so proud.
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 Well, the boy's grown up.
I wasn't ready for that one, Jerry. That's that good one. Ooh, that works. Is that Tom Green? That's a ringer, actually, right there. That locks into place. It's that's perfect casting. We call that central casting, ladies and gentlemen. Expect nothing less from our program today on Thursday, June the 13th, 2024. The CIA connection to the Biden family exposed. Why the hell do these people keep beating every single rap? Well, ladies and gentlemen, they're protected government entities. The entire Biden family itself is a government entity, a part of the blob, useful meat puppets on a board to be moved around for the purposes of the state. And this has become quite clear. And we're going to discuss this, ladies and gentlemen, with our guest this morning, Mike Benz, who is the best person to discuss this with because he is the world's expert on the blob and how it moves around meat puppets all throughout the world. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. You'll notice that we are early this morning. That is because of our commitment to you. We are live during this show. We do not pre-film our shows. We are live. And the reason why we're live early today is because we have to travel to Detroit for a convention. This is the convention that we will be attending in Detroit. Look at those, all the awesome speakers there. You got Candace, you got Trump, you got Ben Carson, Vivek. Dude, this is going to be awesome. Wow, look at us right there on the second tier. Jeez, what do we do to what? Hey, Alex, who do we have to pay off to get on the second tier there? Right next to Tulsi and Byron. Some of our all-time favorites, Nigel Farage. Look at that. Just some absolute brawlers and ballers. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be ready to go. We're also going to be filming quite a bit of content about the destruction of Detroit, how that all happened. And so we're hustling, baby. We're out here. And so we have to head out today, like right after the show, and so we had to be early this morning, and we'll always be live, right? We're going to be live on this program. A lot of people pre-film their shows and pop them up as though they're live, and we don't do that. So here we are, and we do this for the chat. Obviously, we want to be able to comment and talk to you, and yeah, and look right at the chat, and looking right here, Lou David, right on, Benny. Thank you very much, Lou David. I do deeply appreciate the chat. We definitely appreciate all of you. We love you all. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, big problems this morning. Look at that. I'm already out of my blackout coffee. I'm already out. Look at this rattling around. I've had 2 of these because we've had to get in the studio early and rip roar throughout the morning because we'll be traveling all the rest of the day. Blackout coffee was what was in this cup. Now it's gone. You can see the ice. I do it iced because it's hot in Tampa, it's like 100 degrees at like 8 a.m. in Tampa. Blackout Coffee would know this because they're based in Florida. They're a great American company. They make an incredible product, and that product fuels our veins. That sweet, delicious, black caffeinated juice goes straight to our heads every single morning, and it's all we need. It's all we need. We've been doing a lot of talk about other stimulants this week with the Hunter Biden trial, and that's not the way we go on this program. We do like to bring a lot of energy, and that energy is all natural and also springs eternal, ladies and gentlemen, from our faith and hope in this country, which Blackout Coffee also shares. They are a family-owned business, total patriots, no grift, no compromise on taste and quality, and it's what's rattling around in the cup. It's so good. I've had 2 of these this morning. Now they're all gone. Ladies and gentlemen, go to blackoutcoffee.com. Use the coupon code Benny for your first order. You get 20% off. blackoutcoffee.com/Benny. Be awake, not woke. Be awake, not woke. We are awake this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're awake to something that was relatively remarkable in the Hunter Biden trial. And if you are to take from that trial something that is of import and note, and many people have been just total doomers about the trial. And we had Alina Habba on yesterday and Tom Fitton, and everybody's like, you know what? This entire thing is just a smokescreen to hide the Biden's real crimes. And we can't wait to talk to Mike Benz about this. Because Mike Benz is the world's expert, and he's going to join us for a relatively long interview this morning. But let's set the table here. This is not a unmasked photo of a Klan rally, although it's doughy and white enough to be. These are actually your 51 intel experts. I only make that joke because these are the people that militantly shove DEI and forced racial quotas down all the rest of our throats while lecturing us about white rage and white guilt. Yet these are the people, these are the faces of your intel experts who all decided to sign on the dotted line a document that was put together by Antony Blinken, who now serves as our Secretary of State as a reward for creating a document that rigged the 2020 election. So there are many points to be argued about the 2020 election. This and the suspicious and strange things that went on, like changing of all the election laws and the unconstitutionality of all that, drop boxes, ballots, ballot drops at 3 a.m., unlimited mail-in balloting, 30 days of voting, the legitimate illegal changes to our voting. There are many arguments to be made on all of that, and we do our best to make those arguments. This one's not up for debate. These guys rigged the election. That's not up for debate, okay? So rigging the election would be using the muscle of the American state and your name card as an intel expert, a name card that we gave you as the taxpayers by paying your salary and giving you these stations, and then knowingly lying to all of us. So how do we know that they knowingly lied? Well, because the timeline matches up perfectly based on what we know from the Hunter Biden trial. Just a really quick Primrose prance through what we learned in the Hunter Biden trial. There's a moment in the Hunter Biden trial where the FBI agent sitting on the stand has the prosecutor from the government, prosecutor from the DOJ, walks in with a 10-gallon bag There you go. I got a lap. We'll do a reenactment here really quickly. 10-gallon bag. It's probably much more grotesque and dirty than my laptop right here. But here we go. They walk through the courthouse with the laptop, not copies of it, the laptop. They slap the laptop down on the desk in front of the FBI's lead technical expert and go, "Do you know what this is?" They go, "Yeah, that's Hunter Biden's laptop." "How long you had that?" "Since 2019. "How much information you got on that?" "Oh, we got 18,000 pages. 18,000 pages of data that we've taken from that laptop." You're verifying this is Hunter Biden's laptop. "Yeah, this is Hunter Biden's laptop." Put the photos back up. Every single one of these people is a traitor to your nation. Every single one of these people lied to rig an election on behalf of the state in order to steal or manipulate the American public and to psyop the American public. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. These people are traitors. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. We now know that. They've had the laptop confirmed since 2019. Do you think all these people didn't know? These people did war games, actually, with social media companies to figure out how to stop the laptop information from getting out. Why? Because the Bidens are a client. They're a client family meat puppet of the super state, and they were the family that, when they ran all the numbers, had the greatest chance of beating Donald Trump. And so therefore the state must then solidify and protect them at all costs. And the laptop was something that was a big time liability. We call that a liability. And so that's what these people did. They're traitors to their country. They're traitors to you. And they should all be prosecuted. Listen, they just nabbed Trump. The basis of putting Trump in potentially jail, and I want to prepare you for that, in New York, is that Trump rigged the election in 2016 by doing an NDA payment. So how much worse is this? Okay? Not saying I agree with that prosecution of Trump, but okay, if that's the standard, then when are all these people going to Guantanamo Bay? There's your question. Let's just do a really quick setting of the table here before we bring on Mike Benz. So, according to the New York Times, and a reminder here that all those people were probably also big time in favor of the impeachment of Donald Trump for doing something that you're not allowed to do, which is to question funding of Ukraine. How much of a sacred cow was that to the superstate? They impeached Trump for that. Remember, that's what Trump was talking about with Zelensky. Hey, you got to investigate the Bidens. These people are scumbags. Correct. And, I want to give you these weapons, but you better do that. Correct. Right. And Trump even questioning, Trump gave him the weapons. Okay. Trump didn't hold up the weapons. That would, they said Trump didn't do that. He gave him the weapons, but just Trump's daring of potentially withholding the funding for Ukraine was enough to get him impeached. Why? Why was Ukraine so precious? Even back then, there was no hot war or anything going on, right? Well, because you can see here. Because Ukraine has been for better part of a decade, a client state. We say a decade, 2014. We'll talk about that with Mike Benz. But we staged a coup in that country. We installed our own leaders. And then we made Ukraine a client state of ours. It is effectively a United States state right there on the border of Russia. That's what we did. Here, according to New York Times, they talk about the unbelievable number of CIA station houses in Ukraine, how the CIA has all these agents sitting in Ukraine, working with the military, how these agents come under fire from Russia. That seems a little dangerous. I thought this was Ukraine fighting Russia. Wait a second. No? Yeah, no. Ukraine's been a client state of our superstate for a very, very long time. And in fact, you can go back to 2017 here. The CIA director joins Burisma, and it's good news. That's the Huffington Post. Oh man, subtlety is really not their specialty here. No, the CIA. This guy's joined the Burisma board. Okay, just like with Hunter Biden. In case you're wondering how much of this was just a CIA, all of this is just a CIA cutout, right? To f over Russia's gas diplomacy in the region. Just a remarkable moment, and then you wonder why things like this happen. Given those recent headlines, you wonder why the CIA blocks Hunter Biden's sugar brother, Kevin Morris, from being interviewed by federal investigators. This is the guy who pays all of Hunter Biden's legal bills. I'm sure you like people. I'm sure there's people that you like in your life, maybe people that are your best friends, okay? I have no indication that Kevin Morris is Hunter Biden's best friend. Would you pay $5 million of their degenerate coke and drug-fueled prostitution bills? Really? Would you? Do you like them that much? $5 million? That's a pretty penny to anyone, including a high-priced Hollywood lawyer. That's a lot of money. Where did that money come from? What's going on? How could possibly this have happened? Why would the CIA rig the 2020 election effectively to help Joe Biden? What are all these cutouts? What's all these cutouts happening here? Why is the CIA director sitting on the Burisma board? And what's the next step in this game here? What does the Hunter Biden guilty verdict actually mean? And what are they really trying to hide? Because that guilty verdict was never supposed to happen. To unpack it all, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be joined by, I would argue, the world's expert on this topic. The great Mike Benz joins the program now. Hey, Mike. Thanks for being on the program. So, got a question for you. What's going to happen to the 51 Intel experts now that we know that they knowingly lied to us to rig an election?
Probably nothing unless there's a change of guard at the Justice Department. I mean, definitely nothing unless there's a change of guard at the Justice Department. The CIA has a very special relationship with the Justice Department. The Justice Department basically has two jobs. One of them is to prosecute bad criminals, but to protect good criminals who are doing their crime to advance U.S. national interests. This is actually basically what the CIA was set up to do under the 1947 National Security Act when they were given their plausible deniability cloak, that doctrine that allows them to commit under NSC 10-2, they can commit arson, sabotage, demolition, all manner of crimes. But if they're doing it under an authorized CIA operation, it is a crime that is protected by our Justice Department. And this is this relationship where the CIA leans on the DOJ, and DOJ career officials get their careers made by doing these favors for the foreign policy establishment, of which the CIA is sort of one of the main battering rams of. Then these people get their careers made by doing favors for the CIA, and the CIA cashes in those favors by having its own people, its own criminals protected. And this is actually the story of Bill Barr, Trump's DOJ head, who started his career, his first 7 years of his career. He worked at the CIA. He was actually the mop-up man for Iran-Contra when he was the CIA liaison to Congress, blocking the congressional investigation into the CIA's role in Iran-Contra. This is something that left-wing media was very upset about in the 1980s, but then forgot all about when Bill Barr was a good boy for the CIA and blocking the Epstein investigation and blocking the investigation of the 2020 election and throwing Trump under the bus and never touching Hunter Biden. A shock of all shocks that the AG who came from the CIA, while Hunter was committing all these crimes, while the statute of limitations was still in play, said, "I don't see nothing." When he started his career as the CIA's mop-up man, and evidently he ended it that way too.
Right. So if you go through the timeline, all of these crimes that Hunter Biden committed, and we're not arguing that they're not crimes, he was found guilty of them, but they're not on the list of. If you were to go through the laptop and look at the things to charge Hunter Biden with, the top 10, it wouldn't make the top 10 right? Like the gun crimes wouldn't make the top 10 of real true violations of American law that were severe. On a severity chart, what Hunter Biden was found guilty of this week wouldn't even register based on all of the available crimes on the laptop.
Like his firearm. Yeah, they wouldn't even register, just like his firearms weren't registered.
Perfect, Mike. Perfect. Yeah. We should go on the road. So, Mike, I guess my question to you is: this was all happening in 2018. There were the statute of limitations. What do you mean? Like these were happening under Bill Barr's watch? Technically, these crimes were committed under Bill Barr.
Yeah,
a lot of them.
And remember, the FBI had the laptop. The FBI is just the intelligence arm of the Justice Department. The FBI is not some independent standalone thing. The FBI has the same relationship with the Justice Department as the CIA has with the State Department. A lot of people don't really realize this. They see the FBI committing all this malfeasance, all this corruption at the FBI. But the FBI doesn't have a mind of its own. It answers to the Justice Department. There's Justice Department oversight and direction for everything the FBI does. Everything they do has to be authorized by the DOJ. So every time you see a dirty FBI action, there's a dirty Justice Department official who's involved in that and who's green-lighting it. It's the same thing with the CIA and the State Department. This is a story, the Hunter Biden situation, of the CIA, but it's a story bigger than that, because the CIA is actually kind of the smallest and least powerful part of this apparatus, but they are the execution arm of plans, which is to say that the State Department is the big boss of the CIA. The CIA reports to the State Department. Everything has to be greenlit by it. And if you remember, who was it who organized these 51 spies who lied? It was Anthony Blinken in 2020. And who is Anthony Blinken now? He's the Secretary of State, the head of the State Department. And so this thing goes all the way up to the top of the corporate and financial interests that we once called U.S. national champions, who are effectively the master being served by our foreign policy establishment, who's supposed to be serving us. So you have the corporations and financial institutions who are cashing in on the Grand Ukraine energy play and the Seize Eurasia war strategy. And we elect a government that does favors for them because those corporations and financial firms are supposed to be serving us. That is, they're supposed to be getting jobs for us, pensions for us, allowing us a healthy middle-class life for most Americans. And you have a government who we elect to serve us, but they're both working together to screw us. They're taking our tax money. These corporations don't even have their workforces in America anymore. They don't even have their manufacturing base in America anymore. There's no, that sort of Reaganite concept of trickle-down economics. And it's sort of, you can almost think of it like a kind of CIA trickle-down, where the CIA does favors for Exxon and Chevron and Microsoft and Walmart. And then we're supposed to trickle down from there to have our benefit. But instead, it's just them locking in their own financial and political advantages. And we end up getting robbed to pay for it.
So getting robbed, let's talk about just quickly the rigging of the 2020 election as you can see it on its face, right? So the 51 intel experts are made famous. You can see their faces. Many people, especially on the right, would know about them. However, there is also these agents. Elvis Chan comes to mind at the FBI, who was pressuring social media companies about hack and leak operations, but Russian disinformation and Hunter Biden laptop directly from the FBI. Now, this was happening under Trump. And my question to you is how, right? Like, so Donald Trump was apparently in charge, and Trump administration officials were in charge of the FBI and the Justice Department. It's easy to see what's happening under Biden and be like, wow, you got a regime that doesn't like freedom and doesn't like the MAGA movement or America First movement. But this was all happening. All of these egregious things we point to, this all happened whilst our movement was in charge of the executive and therefore the Justice Department and the FBI. And so how do you have, and it's why we call these people traitors, but how do you have the kind of metastasis, the kind of cancer that acts against the body that it's supposed to represent to kill it, happening in such a blatant light? It it shocks the conscience, I suppose.
It's because personnel is policy. That's kind of the saying in Washington, which is that no matter what you say your policy is, all that matters is who is the personnel who is carrying out and enforcing it within each agency. And the Justice Department has been one of these untouchable places in terms of putting in political personnel. And this is one of the reasons that the media is kicking and screaming about Trump 2.0 being wiser than Trump 1.0, because when Johnny McEntee took over the presidential personnel office in the White House in 2020, after 3 years of someone else in charge who did not touch the Justice Department, did not really touch, basically put in a bunch of swamp creatures at every agency for the first 3 years of the Trump term. But they eventually got wise to it. They got smarter as they went along. And this is one of these things where the Justice Department, of all the agencies, and I knew that those folks quite well at that office, and I would hear frequently these complaints. The Justice Department just seemed untouchable in terms of being able to get good personnel in. And there's a lot of bureaucratic tricks that the departments can do. Each is equipped with a sort of unique a very special set of skills to block the White House from being able to get personnel in there. These are the role of careers, because there's only a limited amount of politicals that can even be inserted by the executive branch. It's not like every single Justice Department official can just be replaced. Most of them are entrenched. There's a bureaucracy. Even when you try to replace them, there's some period, 6 months. There's a delay. There's an appeal process. So they're basically in half the term, even if you want to get rid of them, unless they are super high level. There's, for example, a sort of head of the Justice Department type. But if you remember Christopher Wray, who may be actually one of the most sinister figures in all of this. And remember, Christopher Wray is still the FBI director under Joe Biden. I mean, just think about that for a second. The FBI director on January 6th, Donald Trump replaced the FBI director just a few months into his presidency in 2017. But Donald Trump, who we've even told is a threat to democracy, effectively Hitler 2.0, and for some strange reason, the Democrat Joe Biden kept the Republican Trump FBI director to this day. But Christopher Wray threatened when Trump was trying to fight off Russiagate in the early stages. He said that he didn't believe the intelligence from the FBI on Russia's role in influencing the 2016 election. Christopher Wray actually threatened to quit because he said that Trump's remarks were denigrating to the FBI's intelligence capacity, and basically because he's disrespecting them, he sort of puts men and women in the line of duty, under threat. But the answer right there should have been bye. Don't let the door kick you on the way out. But Trump had a lot of turnover. He went through 6 different DHS secretaries in his term. He went through, multiple secretaries of state. I think for whatever reason or whatever favors that were owed either to donors or to his coalition members in the Republican Congress, who was tightly divided between the nationalist and the globalist sides there, he kept Christopher Wray, and that decision ended up knifing him in the back quite hard, both throughout the Russiagate saga, the January 6th saga, and continuing today with the FBI's total destruction of, even now under Christopher Wray's watch, we just saw it reported this week that the FBI literally had internal litmus tests for whether or not you support Donald Trump. I don't know if you saw that, but I think it was Empower Oversight who published, FBI document, which literally had a list. Do they oppose the COVID vaccine? Do they support Donald Trump? That's Christopher Wray's FBI appointed by Donald Trump saying, have you ever expressed vocal support for my old boss? If so, you can't have a job here.
So I think that leads very nicely to these charges with Hunter Biden. And I just want to, I've asked this of a number of people, but you're the person who I very much wanted to ask, what's actually at play here, right? I want to give you the floor because you're one of the world's experts, and I think that nobody maybe understands what's happening on the chessboard in like the 4-dimensional level here more than you. Many have come on this program this week and have pounded their fists on the desk and have said, no, they're covering up for the FARA violations, and that's what we really need to get a special counsel appointed to go after the Bidens for. I'd like to give you the floor, Mike, to maybe like explain like you would to a 3-year-old why that won't ever happen, or maybe why it should, and what the true game was at play there, and why why that nugget specifically in Ukraine, but also around the world in China and Tajikistan and Kazakhstan and Russia, like why that is an untouchable for the blob.
I'm really glad you actually started with that question of what's at stake here, because a lot of people see the stakeholders emerging. You know, they see the CIA blocking the DOJ's questioning of the guy who paid Hunter Biden's taxes. I've talked many times. Hunter Biden was on the chairman's advisory board of NDI, the National Democratic Institute, which is the DNC branch of the National Endowment for Democracy, which was created in a letter from the CIA director. I mean, it's the most prolific CIA cutout in the CIA's whole arsenal. Hunter Biden was on the chairman's advisory board of it. You know, as you mentioned, Cofer Black and all that. So people are seeing the stakeholders in it, but understanding the stakes of it helps understand the magnitude. So, how long would it take you to count to 75 trillion? that maybe is a good opening question. Russia sits on $75 trillion of natural resources. I was actually extremely relieved this week when I saw Lindsey Graham mention finally that the reason that we're in Ukraine is because they've got all the natural resources, dummy. You know, it was like after all this time lying to us, lying. Oh, we're in Ukraine for democracy, but they don't hold elections. We're in Ukraine for democracy, but they banned any other media outlet except the state media. We're in Ukraine for democracy. Oh, they banned alternate religions. We're in there for the democracy. You know, they're rounding people up to drag them out of their homes when they're crippled, to put them on the front lines. It's they're less democratic than Saudi Arabia, and yet but as that excuse is wearing thin, finally cards are starting to be revealed, where finally they're saying, okay, listen, we're in it for the money, okay, man, just don't. I know. We should have started with this all along, but we didn't know. We didn't really. You can see why we didn't, But but what's really interesting too about that is, this. Well, let's start with the stakes. So Graham cited the $12.4 trillion that's sort of the stipulated figure for the total amount of oil, gas, titanium, iron ore, and lithium, and there's a few other critical minerals and rare earths, plus all the oil and gas in Ukraine. And mind you, this is also, we're talking this the week that Saudi Arabia just said it's not going, renewing its petrodollar agreement for the past 50 years. But that's 12 trillion in Ukraine. And then you've got the Eurasian landmass has most of the world's natural resources. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the video of General Laura Richardson effectively ovulating, talking about all the natural resources in Venezuela. Have you ever seen a 4-star general talk about natural resources? If you've ever questioned what true love really looks like, you should see someone from our Joint Chiefs of Staff or a 4-star general talk about a foreign country's natural resources. Find someone who looks at you the way one of our 4-stars looks at natural resources in a foreign country. And that is, and you have to understand, when our foreign policy establishment puts its eyes on that loot, it's the corporations and financial firms that are going to grab that up. And those individuals are going to get their careers made with those institutions that they're really serving. Smedley Butler talked about this in 1936 when he wrote War is a Racket. And, one of the opening lines is, in 1914, I made Mexico safe for Standard Oil, and goes through, all the different countries that even back then, over 100 years ago, our U.S. military was doing. And now that is, as we didn't even have an empire back then. At that time, all we had was Cuba and the Philippines. We didn't have, half of South America, most of Central Asia, most of Central and Eastern Europe. and so that game has multiplied 1,000-fold. And there is an in-process plan. There has been an in-process plan to seize Eurasia. Eurasia is that there's something called the Mackinder hypothesis, which was he who controls Eurasia controls the world. This idea that it's the great island that stretches essentially from Siberia into essentially the sort of Middle East, North Africa region, and scoops through Central and Eastern Europe. And that region is home to something like 70% of the world's hydrocarbons, over half of the world's rare earths and natural and precious metals. And so territorial control of that gives you commercial profit from all of that. But military buffers essentially prevent territorial accession. So do things like coups. Now, when we won the Cold War in 1991, that was the moment that our foreign policy establishment thinks of 1991 through 2006 essentially as being the end of history, the world hegemonic moment of the American empire, as we had no opposition from Russia. China was not economically powerful enough at that point to be able to fund other countries to rebuff us, and we were acquiring one by one all of these Eurasian states and turning them into client states. Everything from Central and Eastern Europe into the Caspian, the Black Sea, Persian Gulf, all of these countries we were basically taking control of politically. And then when Vladimir Putin rose to power, he effectively weaponized Russia's economic soft power over Central and Eastern Europe through gas diplomacy, because 100% of Europe's gas came from Russia at that time. Before the State Department, once Russia threatened Georgia and a bunch of these other Central and Eastern European countries threatened to cut off their gas, and actually did cut off their gas several times, forcing those countries' political leadership to then do favors for the Russian state in order to turn the gas back on. The U.S. State Department embarked on a program of what they called energy diversification or energy diplomacy. So this, again, is a State Department operation in Ukraine, in Central and Eastern Europe, that has been going on for now 20 years. And mind you, the State Department is the big boss of the CIA. The CIA's job is to provide covert, plausibly deniable support for the State Department. Remember, the CIA only exists because the State Department wants to do something, but it would get in too much trouble because it's dirty. So they want a spy agency to do it and not have government fingerprints on it. If it was above board, the State Department would just do it itself. So again, and it was Tony Blinken, who the current head of the State Department, who organized the CIA letter to stop the Hunter Biden, laptop leak. Again, I can't stress that enough. But the reason that they are gunning for Trump, it's my belief, and this is personal opinion, that they don't really, the forces that we're talking about here, the truly dangerous ones, the ones that are actually running this country, they can give a little on domestic tax policy. They can give a little on wokeness. They can give a little on any number of purely domestic culture war issues. But you touch the money, you touch the Seize Eurasia blueprint, it's like a hyena trying to take a carcass from a male lion. You are sparking a gang war at that point, and a very hungry animal is going to see you as the next carcass if you try that. And Trump's policy, if you remember, he didn't just knock out the Clinton dynasty, he knocked out the Bush dynasty, and in doing so, he called Iraq a big fat mistake, Jeb a big fat mess, got us out of Syria, and actually said, honestly, we're in Syria, but we're taking the oil. Kind of like what Lindsey Graham finally said 2.5 years into this war. But again, this war has been raging for a long time because the CIA had been working. Again, there was an in-process CIA operation to seize the eastern part of Ukraine since 2014, when the CIA orchestrated the coup to overthrow the government which is when the breakaway state in Ukraine, the Donbass, even broke away. The CIA started this. The State Department started this. Victoria Nuland at the State Department, and then the CIA-backed right sector mobs who January 6th, effectively the democratically elected president of Ukraine out of office. So then we lost eastern Ukraine. We wanted to take it all back because that's where the money is. That's where the minerals are. That's where the rare earths are. That's where the precious metals are. That's where the oil and gas are. That's where all of the contracts that Burisma had for their mining rights, for their extraction rights, were in the Donbass or in the Black Sea Crimea region. Both of those territories were taken effectively by a Russia-backed, rebel faction, essentially the eastern part of Ukraine. So the CIA took over Ukraine's intelligence state, that article that you read at the top of this, in 2014, in order to militarily reacquire that territory. But I don't think Trump was actually read into all of this. If you remember when Trump took office, right in 2016, there was a flurry of Brookings Institutions and Atlantic Council and the Atlantic, all these publications about whether or not the national security state should really tell Donald Trump all of the state secrets. Maybe we need to hide the ball a little bit. Now, I think they drastically understated it in that tone. If you remember, we know that they lied to Trump about troop movements in Syria, and we had generals come out and say, well, we told them one thing about what was happening in Lebanon or Syria, but we actually we were constantly playing shell games, I think was the quote. If you look up that quote about what our own generals were doing to mislead Trump. And I think the same thing was happening in Ukraine. I think they basically said this is kind of a need to know thing. This is all written. Now remind, like, the CIA is not all powerful. They win some, they lose some. They only have a certain amount of funding to be able to pull things off. So if they need to budget things, they've got scarce resources. They were not doing well in Ukraine when Trump got into office. If Trump then it pulled the plug on it, you have an incredibly high stakes, again, trillions of dollars of stakeholder loot at stake already in process. If Trump takes any action against this, it knocks over the whole Jenga tower. And this is, again, why they did the impeachment. But there's a lot more there, but I've been going on for a while, so I'll pause.
I mean, this is so educational. The two important follow-up questions. One, it seems suicidal. Eurasia's really far away. And the goal then would be what? Breaking up Russia? The goal would then be, presumably you'd have to, you'd need to then go to war with Russia and then conquer Russia? Is that the end result here?
Oh yeah, you can read Michael McFaul's. Michael McFaul's probably written, a sort of Jane Austen-sized novel on how you can break up Russia to achieve this. Michael McFaul was the U.S. ambassador to Russia under the Obama administration, and is currently the head of the Freeman Spogli Institute at Stanford, which houses the Stanford Internet Observatory, which was the place that effectively censored and effectively rigged the 2020 election. They were the ones who got, by their own math, tens of millions of tweets labeled misinformation, anything that questioned mail-in ballots. All of that stuff was under Michael McFaul. Michael McFaul, so again, people look at that like mail-in ballots. It's a domestic issue. No, this is coming from Michael McFaul, who was, the U.S. ambassador to Russia. And the U.S. ambassador is the State Department head of the region. They're the quarterback of the CIA activity in the region. You can read, Richard Bloom's Killing Hope, and you'll read in the first chapter about how the thing the CIA fears most is not Russian spies. It's the U.S. ambassador in the region, because that's who makes or breaks an operation. So you got the guy who was quarterbacking the CIA's activities for Eurasia and Russia, and he's the one who's effectively controlling the institution that was the reason that all of us got kicked off of social media in 2020 for talking about mail-in ballots, because they wanted to pre-rig it for Joe Biden to continue the Seize Eurasia grand plan. But yes, they do want to break up Russia. They've already drawn up maps about how it can be split in 6 or 7 ways by ethnically balkanizing it, the same way they did to Yugoslavia. They take all the different regions, they sort of group it by the different factions on sort of ethnic grounds and on sort of religious grounds, and then they effectively would could partition it that way. The other way is if they could simply regime change it, by finding a Boris Yeltsin type puppet figure. This was the role that they had groomed for Alexei Navalny. Alexei Navalny, who was polling at less than 2% of the votes. Alexei Navalny, who made the prank phone calls about the attacks on him with Bellingcat, who's funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which was Hunter Biden's outfit, the CIA cut out. Alexei Navalny, who was groomed at the Yale Jackson School of Global Policy. That is, he was recruited to come basically train at the Yale Jackson School to do peaceful protests in Russia. The Yale Jackson School gets its name from the guy who Bill Clinton nominated to be CIA director in the 1990s. The whole thing, if we can get a compliant CIA puppet to run Russia with an iron friggin' fist, then you can preserve Russia without balkanizing. But those are basically the two choices: regime change in a CIA coup or balkanizing it Yugoslavia style.
Russia has most of the world's nuclear weapons. This seems suicidal by definition.
Yes, well, it's also worth noting that they have most of the world's natural resources. And when I mentioned this, that Russia has $75 trillion of natural resources, the U.S. only has $45 trillion of gross exploitable natural resources. So, even though we've got 3 times Russia's population, 20 times its GDP, John McCain was fond of saying, they're a gas station with a military. Well, they're such a big gas station that they actually have almost twice as much natural resources as we do. And that's just Russia, let alone all the Russia adjacent sort of Eurasian satellite regions. Your Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, the whole sort of Central Asia, Eastern Europe rim. And so if we can just break them, economically, break them militarily, it's all ours. And then along comes a guy who's edgily shit posting on Twitter, and the American people love him. And damn it, we have a constitution that makes him commander in chief. That can't be right. That would screw up our plans. And we're living in the aftermath of that that cognitive dissonance between the will of the people and the will of the blob.
So the will of the blob, very interesting, man. Maybe we should rewrite some documents with that. So we the blob, right, would be the correct writing.
Don't jinx it. We might have a new constitution soon that just straight up says it.
Woohoo! So the will of the blob is something that is protecting the Bidens. This really does kind of set everything in really stark relief here, because that's why the Bidens don't get investigated for their foreign dealings, because they were acting as cutouts for this apparatus and engaging in this grand orchestrated foreign policy to break up Russia and to secure natural resources. Is that correct?
Yes. And remember, it's the State Department. The CIA is the dirty arm of the State Department. And so the CIA is dirty, but it's the dirty arm. It's the gangrene arm. The gangrene rotted brain of it is state, the evil megamind brain of it. And I know there's a meme, people say I look like that guy, but in a bad way. But what I'm saying is, Joe Biden himself was the chairman or ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for 15 years before he became vice president running Obama's foreign policy on Eastern Europe. And he was on that committee for 40 years. 40 years oversight of the State Department was done by Joe Biden. And again, whenever you hear State Department, that means the CIA and DOD, because both of those equities filter into, but we'll just stick with CIA. He's the oversight of state, the underbelly of which is the CIA. It's the sort of kissing cousin of the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's an intelligence job. Joe Biden spent 40 years of intelligence oversight. The CIA's big brother was being overseen by Joe Biden. He is Mr. Blob. The Council on Foreign Relations called him, quote, Mr. Foreign Policy. And I will just remind folks of this. Joe Biden, early in his career, when he was in his 30s, said in front of a camera that he considered himself to be akin to a prostitute because of the favors that he would have to do to outside stakeholders in order to win re-election. And he was Mr. Foreign Policy on the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Who was he prostituting for? That tells you his own words. I mean, 1 + 1 is 2. The guy said he's a sellout. His job is foreign policy. He's selling out to the foreign policy establishment. He's doing the dirty work. And he puts his friggin' son as his bagman to carry out those activities. And then the CIA turns around and protects the bagman from the Justice Department.
And we've seen that. That's been completely reported out. That the CIA is saying, can't touch this, can't touch this guy, can't touch this guy. The guy who makes all these mysterious payments on behalf of Hunter Biden, can't touch him, can't investigate him. And we're blocking it. And speaking of blocking, Mike, you brought up something that, so again, shocks the conscience. So we have these phone calls and the last hours of Joe Biden as vice president, when typically you'd be taking photos with your grandchildren, at least the ones that you acknowledge, and you'd be writing beautiful letters or maybe a poem about your time as vice president. Now, Joe Biden did something very strange. He began calling Poroshenko in this series of rabid phone calls, dictating certain banks be closed, talking about how we need to get this place ship shape before Trump becomes sophisticated enough to figure out what's going on here. I just want to play this really short clip here because you're making this contention in the last answer that the entire blob apparatus stopped Trump from learning things. And this seems to be possibly the best piece of evidence to prove that you are right. Here we go.
Getting very, very close. What I don't want to have happen, I don't want Trump to get in a position where he thinks he's about to buy onto a policy where the financial system is going to collapse and he's going to be looked to pour more money into Ukraine. That's how he'll think about it before he gets sophisticated enough to know the details. So anything you can do to push the Privat Bank to closure so that the IMF loan comes forward, I would respectfully suggest is critically important to your economic as well as physical security.
So it's like physically threatening the security of a foreign leader. But besides that, why is Joe Biden like sweatily and quite frantically muscling in on Ukraine policy? And these are in the last hours of Joe Biden as vice president. These phone calls are made.
Yeah, because if Trump were to learn the truth of how corrupt Ukraine was, what a economic disaster it was, then the policy that Trump already was running on effectively on a fundamental renegotiation of our stance with Russia and basically reversing the 2014 to 2016 Obama policies on Ukraine-Russia policy. Then if it looked like it was a losing proposition, or if it looked like the money was being squandered, Privat Bank was a giant money laundering cesspool. They were basically taking the IMF money and just kicking it to their own warlords. By the way, these sort of these Ukrainian oligarchs, happen to be some of the biggest donors to the blob. Viktor Pinchuk, for example, the Ukrainian oligarch, was the single largest donor to the Clinton Global Foundation and actually started together with Joe Biden and Anders Fogh Rasmussen, the three of them. Joe Biden, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who was the head of NATO from 2009 to 2014, the first 5 years of the Obama administration until the Crimea annexation. So Joe Biden personally in 2018, who at that point was not even a politician, he was a post vice president, hadn't even declared he was running yet. He, the head of NATO, and the Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Pinchuk started something called the the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity, which was basically a giant censorship coalition spanning stakeholders in the US and NATO in order to stop the election of right-wing populist parties in NATO who themselves were running on restoring relations with Russia. Because remember, a big part of Obama's policy from 2014 to 2016, Biden's policy from 2014 to 2016, was sanctioning Russia over the Crimea annexation. They forced half of Russia to cut off their own leg and to cut off, the gas deals that they were having with Russia, to sanction them as punishment for providing military support for Crimea breaking away from Ukraine to join the Russian Federation. And so I also find that really interesting, that clip about the IMF bank closure, moving forward the IMF loan, because the IMF is effectively George Soros. I mean, he's kind of the battering ram of the International Monetary Fund, which is one of these sort of gangster organizations that operates like a mafia, where they provide you protection essentially in the form of a high interest rate short-term loan when you are economically unstable, and then as collateral for repayment, it's all of your infrastructure, all of your natural resources, all of your publicly held state wealth. And at the time that this clip was being played, the IMF was effectively seeking to have as moving forward that loan would effectively force Ukraine to divest and sell off to NATO stakeholders these state-held assets, especially some company called Naftogaz, which is the state-owned Ukrainian gas company that the State Department and CIA were basically planning to build up as Ukraine's version of Gazprom, where it had made its money as gas transits from Russia. But if Burisma could mine enough of the endogenous shale in Ukraine, both in the Donbass and in the Black Sea, then they could build up a supply at Naftogaz to sort of rival Gazprom. So Burisma was sort of the feeder arm to Naftogaz. Burisma was Hunter Biden and Cofer Black from the CIA, and Naftogaz was George Soros. George Soros has been in a, quote, tug of war with Vladimir Putin for control of Naftogaz for almost 30 years now. And the IMF deal, if they don't pay the IMF money, that essentially gets sold off in a fire sale. And in fact, that process is already underway.
So I guess a final parting shot here, because the reason why I was so interested, Mike, in having you on, especially this week, is because so many on the right are banging the drums and hitting the wooden blocks together and saying, wait, no, please investigate Joe Biden's corrupt foreign policy dealings. That's never going to happen because it would expose all this. It would field strip and gut this entire process, because the Bidens were just meat puppets for the blob, right? I mean, the entire Biden family is just a cutout, prostitute, as you note, for this operation. And they're just one small player in order to facilitate this greater grand orchestra of Siege Eurasia. And I've learned so much in this interview, but am I getting that right? Like a true investigation, a true special counsel indictment of Joe Biden and his foreign dealings would expose all of this, and they would never let that happen?
Yeah. The story of the Biden family is essentially a story of state secrets. It's the apple from Genesis. It is fruit from the tree of knowledge, and you are cast out of Eden for knowing it. And I mean that's what this is. And we'll know, by the way, if there is a changeover in the Justice Department, if they allow an attorney general who is not beholden to the blob, if that day ever comes, well, prayers for them if it does. But I don't know that it ever will. We've not had that in our country for over a century. I'm not optimistic on it happening now. If you remember, we had a very aggressive attorney general in the late 1960s, run for president and capture the DNC nomination as the attorney general, pledging to clean house at the CIA. And that was that was JFK. That was Bobby Kennedy. That he was assassinated just days after. I think actually right after he won the nomination for the presidency. So Justice Department is the Strait of Gibraltar on this. Essentially, it's the narrow strait that all of this passes through. That's why the CIA leans on it so hard, because all of the state secrets really flow through that. If you wanted to do an investigation of it, it would pursuing the crimes reveals the secrets. And this is the reason that the CIA, for example, blocked the investigation on national security grounds of the assassination of Haiti's president in Miami here. The CIA leaned on DOJ to not make public and not release certain materials in discovery. If you remember that there were FBI trained and FBI informants and U.S. military trained folks who assassinated Haiti's president, the CIA stepped in and said, Justice Department, don't make these discovery materials public. Don't allow the defense counsel to even have access to that. We had Jeffrey Epstein being waved off by the CIA. If you remember, Alex Acosta said the reason that he didn't go after Jeffrey Epstein was because, quote, he belongs to intelligence. We have the CIA leaning on the Justice Department with Hunter Biden, and you better believe that they're going to do that, all that and then some with the Big Mac Daddy, Joe Biden himself.
Yes. So a final shot here. What would doomsday look like? Let's say Trump wins. The polls show Trump winning. Okay. And it seems to me, at the very least, and I'm a glass half full kind of silver linings optimist by nature, it seems like what's been happening is they've been just putting bumper cars on what could potentially be a second Trump term. That many are trying to effectively just kneecap it before it happens. And then there's a protection mechanism there. But all of that aside, Trump wins, an attorney general gets in who's like a Ted Cruz. I know Ted Cruz was a finalist for attorney general in term 1.0, and I think America would have a very different history if he was. Let's say somebody gets in, Ted Cruz, and then there's an appointment of a special counsel to actually properly look into this. What happens next?
Well, it's tough because Ted Cruz. I like Ted
or
Cruz.
Whoever, right? It doesn't matter. Whoever.
I only mentioned just Ted Cruz is a funny example because he had holds on something like 35 different Biden administration picks in 2021 on everything like DEI grounds, a bunch of different things. He was holding up appointments from his Senate seat, and he traded it all for a floor vote. All these domestic issues around like domestic culture war, like domestic affairs, he traded all the holds for a floor vote on reinstating sanctions on the Nord Stream pipeline, not even knowing that the State Department had this plan to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. So all the stuff that Ted Cruz was like talking, I just find it funny because Ted Cruz is like an example of someone that you would think would pursue this aggressively, and yet he traded all of our concerns domestically for a failed floor vote just to put sanctions on a gas pipeline 7,000 miles away, 10,000 miles away almost from his, you can't pick a farthest point on the globe from Texas than Germany. But that I think is revealing in that it's really hard to find somebody in a high level of political power in this country who is not beholden in some way to the financial top side of the blob. I mean, Joe Biden himself came to power from BlackRock. He decided to run for president, according to the New York Times, after he got the green light from Larry Fink in a January 2019 BlackRock meeting. His closest advisor is one of the Donilon brothers, the brother of Tom Donilon, who is the head of the investment arm of BlackRock, the guy who actually makes the portfolio decisions for the $10 trillion of their assets under management. Biden's a BlackRock president, and he's BlackRock's battering ram, using the CIA and the Pentagon and the State Department, to cash all that in. And to find somebody in this country who's not beholden to that, you need to find basically someone who's broke. Look with like a Mike Johnson type. But look at Mike Johnson. Look how fast they turned Mike Johnson. So if you can find a really based cab driver who he's just straight YOLO mode, do what you're going to do. I'm like ride or die, like, someone like that's basically who you should put in charge of the Justice Department, like the most based Uber driver you've ever seen. That's basically probably the only way we're going to, get out of this.
Okay. You once met a very based Uber driver. There's a video of you with I'm not sure it was an Uber, but it was definitely Logan Paul shouting you out. I think we have that loaded right here. Here we go.
Really great. Yeah. Yo. What's up, man?
Keep making YouTube content, bro. Subscribe to his channel.
Okay, it's just a personal note, but thanks, man. That's Logan Paul.
Benny,
Logan Paul just
The timeline's broken, dude.
would you believe me if I told you that was my first tweet? That's actually the reason I started a Twitter account. Look, you can thank Logan Paul for the reason we're having this conversation.
Okay.
I was like, this is a cool video. I have nowhere to put it. And I'd been thinking about starting a Twitter account when Elon took over. I was like, oh, you know what? It kind of feels like the platform's kind of safe now to like create a Twitter account. And I was like, well, maybe this is like a good way to start an account. So I just, Logan Paul, I ran into it, was like, okay, I'm going to upload this and send this to my sister. And now 19 months later, here we are.
Here we are. You should follow Mike Benz's account, obviously, if you don't already. You're crazy. Whoa, hold up. Just a second. Did we lose Mike? No, we did not lose Mike. No. Sorry about that, Mike. Follow Mike Benz, 330,000 Americans, obviously. Can't be wrong. You're probably one of the most followed foreign Paul. You terrify the Blob, man. Got to tell you, the Blob's very angry at Logan Paul for starting this.
And I'll see you in Detroit, I think. I'm actually going to be heading there myself.
Right. That's exactly right. So we out here, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, for sharing the reality here, and I guess just for giving us a cold ice bath of truth and what's really going on.
Thanks, Benny. Talk soon.
Yeah. Godspeed, Mike. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mike was talking all about the value of natural resources and how precious they are, and how effectively all the nation states in the world are fighting over them, and that's what's going to cause World War III. So an uplifting message for you and me, but also, ladies and gentlemen, something that we should consider when we observe the news, something that we should consider when we follow what's going on and track sort of the underlying reasons for what's happening. It actually causes, what's the right way to say this? I would rather not live in darkness. I call this like the simple Christian in me, but I would rather live in the light. I would rather know these things. That that we're not here to fight for democracy. We're here to do the same thing that every empire throughout the history of all recorded time has done, which is to slaughter and kill and to extend ourselves in the assumption and gathering of resources throughout the world. And that is the end result, obsessive, frothing, rabid goal. Mike called it like a hungry hyena, for us to just go and I'd rather know that, because actually it makes you more sane when you watch news cycles and you're like, this makes no sense. And then you can sit back and see the actual game going on. You're like, oh, that's why they don't prosecute Joe Biden, because they'd be prosecuting themselves. Ah, got it. Okay, got it. So the Justice Department is going after themselves. Oh, that's a pretty bad motivation to put themselves in prison. Got it. Okay, this makes perfect sense. I like it's depressing. Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson had a podcast, and Tucker's like, I wish I was middle-aged in 1950. And I just died in the 70s or 80s and didn't know any of these things and just lived sort of a blissful life. And Joe Rogan's like, no, screw that, man. I'm like glad to know. I'm glad to be awake, and we're glad to be awake. I think I ascribe more to that. Of like, I'm just glad. I'm glad to be awake. It's sad. It's sad to know these things, but the truth shall set you free, says the scriptures. You should know what is happening in the world around you. You should use Patriot Mobile to know what's going on. Patriot Mobile is the cell phone company, of course, that keeps us connected everywhere on the road, including when we film and the apocalypse that is Detroit later today. We will be using our Patriot Mobile phones. We will stay connected, and this connection gives us knowledge. It's very important for us, and it's important for you. It's important to have knowledge and light in your life. Patriot Mobile provides us quick and confident connections on all three major networks without funding the left. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're sending a message that you support free speech, religious freedom, and the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, military veterans and first responders and heroes, many of them working at Patriot Mobile. Just go to patriotmobile.com/Benny, call 972-PATRIOT, get free activation today with the offer code Benny. Make the switch today, patriotmobile.com/Benny, 972-PATRIOT. All right, ladies and gentlemen, time for our verse of the day. Make sure that we set ourselves up straight before traveling to a very dangerous place here. All right. Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Man, doesn't you feel that one, man? Hits you like a punch in the gut. Not against flesh and blood, but against the dark rulers of the world. It's really valuable to keep that in mind when you get frustrated with this struggle at hand, to sort of take a step back and recognize that this is the same struggle that we've had since God created this place, right? Like it's always been the same struggle. The leaders and the nation, they kind of sort of like change like shark teeth, right? They're just like one after another. Like set your soul right, okay? Set your soul up correctly. The real struggle is with the blackness of the spiritual realm and the darkness that can be seized in this place, and you must have a spiritual weapon to fight that. You have to be armed correctly, right? And they say the armor of God, and that's correct. So if that is your real fight, then make sure that you come correct. You're reading your Bible, you're praying, and that you are marching towards a spiritual victory first, ladies and gentlemen. And then every other victory will then descend from that. We march on this program, and we march with you. You can't defeat a happy army. You can't defeat happy warriors. And you can't defeat warriors who are very, very salty. And ladies and gentlemen, that's us here on The Benny Show. We hope you enjoyed that long-form interview with Mike. No one's smarter on this topic. And our goal here, ladies and gentlemen, is to spread salt and light. And so with lightheartedness, go forward today. It's your boy Benny. See ya.
Look, it says #1 son on the license plate.
I'm gonna make you proud, Daddy.
You make your daddy proud.
I'm gonna make you so proud.
You make your daddy proud.
You're gonna be so proud.
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 Well, the boy's grown up.